Hello, everyone. My name is Jody Kielbasa. I'm the Vice Provost for the Arts and the Director of the Virginia Film Festival, and I'd like to welcome all of you to this afternoon's Film and Industry Career Panel, presented by the Virginia Film Festival and UVA Career Services. Today's panel features an accomplished group of UVA alumni who have forged significant careers in the film, television, and entertainment industry, and who, fortunately for us, all serve as advisory board members for the Virginia Film Festival. Today's moderator is Scot Safon. Scot's a longstanding VAFF board member and career media and marketing professional. Scot, welcome, and thanks to you and your fellow panelists for joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
I can.
Great. Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us. Thank you to the panelists for joining us, too. I have had the pleasure of moderating a number of career-related panels at the university, many times in association with the Virginia Film Festival, and they're always great experiences for me because I learn a lot about the industry, and I've been in the industry for 35 years after my time at Virginia. The oddness of this construct, doing a panel on Zoom, is such that the first half of this discussion, I will put out there a couple of questions, and I will have to ask each of the panelists if they want to comment on the questions. Normally, I take my cues, we're in person, I just take my cues from the panelists. If they want to say something, I kind of know. This time I won't, because it's hard to pick up nuances on Zoom. So I may ask the panelists, each one of the panelists for each question. They won't all want to respond to every question, and that's cool. But that's the only way to get this done properly on Zoom. And the first half of this session, I will ask the questions, and we'll have a lot of dialogue. You'll hear from all the panelists. The second half, we will take your questions. We have taken a bunch of questions already, so I do have some backup questions that came from students. And then we also have the Q&A function. So if you got on here in time to see where it's at the bottom of your panel, there is a function that's called Q&A. And it's pretty self-explanatory in terms of how you put a question up. If we may not get to all the questions, and I just apologize for that in advance, but we'll try to. And this panel is going to discuss your career stuff, industry stuff, life stuff. I have had the pleasure of knowing some of these panelists for a number of years, but several of them I'm meeting for the first time myself. So I love hearing people's career stories. I love hearing other industry professionals talk about life in the media and entertainment industries, and hopefully you'll find it all really, really helpful, and I certainly will enjoy it. The first thing I've asked the panelists to do, each one of them is going to introduce themselves, and they're going to tell us something about what they currently do in the industry, a credit or a project that they're particularly proud of that you might know, their first job out of school, and in most cases, it probably didn't have anything to do with the entertainment industry, but they'll try to connect that. And because then I want them to tell us the first job they've had in the industry, and then I do want them to tell us to share what their undergraduate degree was, because I think that is also very illuminating. I'll start with myself, though. I graduated the University of 1982. I was a history and economics major, hoping to go into something related to the media and entertainment world. I got an MBA. I did go to graduate school. I went to Cornell. Then my first job was in advertising, and I was marketing Pepto-Bismol, and I thought it was the most glamorous job in the world, but it was not. It was not working in the entertainment industry. I eventually got to do that. About 8 years later, went to work for Ted Turner down here in Atlanta, where I still live. I spent 11 years, no, actually I spent 23 years at Turner Broadcasting, 11 as the head of marketing for TNT, which was a brand new network when I got there, and 11 as the head of marketing for CNN. Then I went over to the Weather Channel, was their head of marketing. Today I am a marketing consultant. I work for a lot of different companies and sometimes step in as their head of marketing for like a year or so. I'm just finishing up a year at MotorTrend, which is owned by Discovery Communications. So I work on a lot of car programming and a car streaming service and everything. And it's really fun. And I could honestly, and one of the questions that will come up later is, how do you convince your parents that going into the media and entertainment industry is actually a smart move. And we will address that because it's, for all of us, I think it's been a wonderful move. So next up, I would love the intro. Glenn Williamson, why don't you go next?
Thanks, Scott. And thanks everybody for being here today. I'll stick to the facts, as they say in that Dragnet TV show, but I graduated in '85. My first job out of college was as a waiter at Tavern on the Green in New York City because I needed to pay the bills while I looked for my real job in advertising, which I eventually got. My first job in the business was in the mailroom at Castle Rock Entertainment. I got it from a Virginia alumni who was in that job, who was going to work on a film. And I only knew 3 people in LA and 2 of them were alumni. So I really leaned into that. Right now, I'm currently co-area head of UCLA's 2-year MFA producers program, which is wonderful. We have a great program, as does USC's, which are they're 2 of the very top programs. And our former, AFI has a good program too, but not as good as USC and UCLA since Bob's not here today. But yeah, I'm happy to be there. The credits I'm most proud of, I'll try to keep it short. I was an executive for a while, first at DreamWorks and president of production of Focus, and really proud of the 2 movies as an executive, American Beauty and Far From Heaven. As a producer, really one of the first credits I got, Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, which has a legacy, which has been wonderful. And Sunshine Cleaning, because it has a lot to do with the festival getting made, because Megan Holly lives in Richmond. And then first full movie I did was Hollywoodland, which was a wonderful experience producing a period movie. You kind of realize how talented all the artists you work with as producers are. So I probably forgot something, but I'll be around when you have questions.
That's great. Well, if people may want to be asking, a lot of people will wind up Googling you too, so they'll get a chance to see all of it. Thanks so much, Glenn. Janet and Borba, you go next. You've had quite a wonderful career. Tell us about it.
Great. First of all, thank you everybody. First of all, for being here. Secondly, for inviting me to join you, which is always a pleasure. In no particular order, what I do right now is I head up physical production for HBO. Our scripted stuff, comedy and drama, our documentaries, sports, specials, sort of the whole gamut. I have been at HBO for longer than most of you have been alive. I started, but it was not my first job in Hollywood, which really dates me. I finished at UVA in 1979. I was an Eccles Scholar, so I didn't actually have a proper major. I did a lot of economics and, strangely, a lot of Spanish American literature, because those are the 2 things I was super interested in at the time. But I did use the Eccles Scholar program as a way of dabbling. My first job after college was at this I hope will make someone laugh, the National Grain and Feed Association, which was a lobbying organization for agricultural folks. And then I moved very quickly into construction and real estate development. And then from there came out here to LA, got my master's at USC, where I still teach, and worked for a director, and then had a development job, and then eventually came to work at HBO. So I think did I answer all your questions, Scott?
The only thing that Janet did not tell you is, like, she can
credits
on Game of Thrones. and
exactly.
Those productions are ambitious productions. The HBO productions are amazing, and Janet has had a hand in making all of those productions happen. So it's pretty awesome. Julie Lynn, you go next.
I think my main claim to fame is that I've guest taught for Janet, for Glenn. So I've guest taught at all those programs. I graduated from UVA undergrad in '88, law school in '92. My undergraduate degree was in drama and foreign affairs. And my first job out of undergrad was working in the marketing for theater department at the Kennedy Center, where I had one of the great bosses of all time, who I think actually taught me how to be a boss. So that was great. That's the thing I've carried with me. After I was a lawyer, I did that, then I went to law school. I did some public interest work for nonprofits. And then I started working for other producers. And then in 1999, I started my own production company. And then about a decade later, I took on a partner, Bonnie Curtis, and we make movies. We go back and forth between sort of big studio films and smaller independent fare. Scott, I do not think I can pick favorite babies amongst my movies. I think I can tell you that probably what I'm most proud of is that we work with a lot of the same writer-directors over and over. And so I'm really proud of that. You know, I've done multiple projects with Rodrigo Garcia and Robin Swycord and Marty Noxon and different people. So rather than pick favorite babies, I'll pick some repeat baby makers. How's that? Does that answer you?
That's perfect. And actually that is also going to be the subtext to a lot of what we talk about, I think too, is that finding collaborators that you always want to work with, that you always want to do stuff with and come back to, whether some of those people that I work with and do stuff with are people I met at Virginia. It's still, 40 years later, we're still working with each other and doing stuff. My
partner has been to the Virginia Film Festival so many times that she now tells everybody that she went to UVA and that we were roommates.
Knobs, which is a movie that I love and I will always recommend to everybody. So anyway, that's an aside. I'll talk about one of your credits. Liz, why don't you go next?
You paused on my last name, but it is Biber. It is Biber. So I graduated from UVA. I'm new to this whole group, everyone. I just joined the advisory board for the Virginia Film Festival, which was called the Virginia Festival of American Film when I was a student at UVA. I graduated in '94. And I think I had a job that was like the student liaison or the student something or other, working with the Virginia Film Festival. And I remember my fourth year, Robert Mitchum and Roger Ebert were there, and it was definitely kind of a glitzy experience for Charlottesville. My first job out of college was also my first job in the entertainment industry. I knew really early on that I wanted to do PR for movies, and that's unusual. Most students will not know sort of what area of the industry they want to work in, but I happened to come upon that very early. And my first job was working for someone that some people on this Zoom might know, Nadia Bronson at Universal Pictures. She was at the time the head of international publicity and just an incredible force and an incredible boss who just, I joined her team as an assistant, which meant, you'll hear a lot about working as an assistant in Hollywood, but really doing everything from, cleaning up messes to fetching coffee to, typing things up and faxing them, which was, state of the art at the time. And, I've stayed in film PR for most of my career. I worked at Universal, Columbia. I then moved into the indie space. I worked at the Weinstein Company for many years. And from there, I was one of the founding execs of Open Road Films, which was the independent distribution company founded by AMC and Regal. So during the time at Open Road Films, one of the highlights was certainly working on Spotlight, which was the 2016 Best Picture winner. And, I remain in close contact with everyone involved in that film and have worked for those people again, which is certainly satisfying. And now I've recently become a partner at a somewhat new PR firm called the Lede Company, working on films and series and also working on awards campaigns. Awards campaigns are a significant portion of my work.
Thank you. That's great. This is, out of all the years that I've moderated panels related to careers in media and entertainment, we never get people like from PR. So I'm so happy to have somebody. It is a real, earned media, public relations, social media. This is a really, really super important part of the business. And it's a really fun part of the business. And I get to dabble in it too. So I'm just happy to have a fellow traveler on the panel. Stephen, you get to be the final panelists to introduce themselves.
Okay. Hi, I'm Stephen Kung. I am a writer on the show Dear White People. I'm also a director. I directed the 6th season of Fresh Off the Boat. I graduated in 1999 with a degree in foreign affairs and a minor in Chinese. My first job out of school was also at the Kennedy Center. I was an intern in jazz programming. And what that job taught me was I didn't want to support the talent. I wanted to be the talent. And then I went to grad school at USC, the Peter Stark Producing Program, mentioned above. And the Peter Stark program is sort of a liberal arts education in film where you get to learn everything about film, not only just like producing, but also like directing and sound and production. And you learned it in 2 years instead of 3. Janet Graham Borba was indeed my professor while I was there. She taught me physical production. So that was a lot of fun. And while I was in the Stark program, they're one of the few programs that have paid internships in LA. And my first internship in LA was actually at a startup company called Focus Features, where my boss, Stephen Emery, was Glenn Williamson's assistant. My first job in the industry was working as an assistant. Like most everyone's job in the industry is working as an assistant. I was the executive assistant to Ed Saxon, who produced Silence of the Lambs adaptation. He was basically Jonathan Demme's producing partner for a time.
Wow, that's great. So, so those of you,
I worked on the PR for adaptation, and I've definitely, and I worked on when I was just an assistant at Columbia. I worked on both Men in Black 1 and 2. So I'm pointing at Glenn, although I don't know if that.
So that observation is super important because obviously this is a business where you do go from project to project, from assignment to assignment, from company to company, and you do collect experiences with people all the time, and you even if you don't actively stay in touch with them, you do reconnect with people constantly. This has been like all these people I met in my 24 years at Turner, I now deal with all through my consulting world, and I re-encounter them, and we're happy to see each other and do projects again, and those become the shared things that you do share. So it's a wonderful industry for that, even when you've had a shared disaster, which I've had plenty. And things that didn't work are as fun to talk about as things that worked. So anyway, put that there. What I do want to talk about is, all of you talked about the kind of work you're doing now, which I appreciate. I do want to hear how what you're doing during quarantine. And not about your personal life so much as how you feed your professional life by that. But it could be anything from how you're structuring a work day, how you're staying in touch with people, whatever. Just curious about it. I think a lot of people on the call are looking ahead to 3 or 4 months maybe of quarantine or semi-quarantine or tentative quarantine, and they're very curious about what they should be, how they could be spending their time productively. So I'm going to start with Stephen in this case. We'll go back around the other way.
How I'm spending my time productively. So I just wrapped Dear White People last month. So I'm currently I'm in between jobs, but the euphemism for writers is I'm developing. So I'm developing projects. And also interviewing for the next staffing job. One project that I'll speak about that's very exciting to me personally is, a lot of you are familiar with Dear White People, which is about the Black experience at college. And me, when I was at UVA, I was really involved in the Asian American community, and I always wanted to do a spin-off of that. So after the show ended a month ago, I started crafting and honing my pitch for Dear Asian People, practiced it with one of my bosses, attached one of the writer-producers from the show board, and then we pitched the showrunner, Justin Simeon, who's on board. And I just received word yesterday that CA is gonna set us a pitch meeting with Lionsgate, and hopefully we're gonna pitch it and get that off the ground. So I'm constantly developing projects. So that's what I do to keep sane.
Are you in doing that, are you having to set aside a certain number of hours every day to just like not be on Zoom and not have meetings and just to write or just to think? how do you do that?
I don't have enough going on to sort of like set a schedule. So I'm playing my Nintendo Switch a lot. I'm playing Marvel's Ultimate Alliance for ungodly hours of the day. Yeah, so like I figure it's, and I pour myself a nice cocktail every day. So while I'm at this time, I know I hustle a lot. I work hard, but I also play hard. And I feel like during the quarantine, we should be kind to ourselves. And you think of it as a time to re-energize and do what we want. But at this, you know, it's a different balance for everyone. So obviously what I'm doing will not jive with an alcoholic, right? But like everyone should find their own balance, but don't forget to be kind to yourself.
Right.
Because there will be lots of times during your career where you will be unemployed. And it's not just the quarantine. This will happen a lot. Like Janet Graham Borba's career trajectory is an anomaly because like most people hop jobs to jobs every couple of years. And during that time, you'll need to know how to like deal with the unemployment of it all. So that's just something to be aware of as you enter the industry.
Okay. Thank you. Liz, how are you spending quarantine in terms of feeding your work need?
You know, I feel fortunate to say that, you know, despite enjoying free time, my work hasn't changed very much since quarantine started. I actually started at the Lede company the day before we closed down the office. So it was definitely a strange time to start a new job, but I'm fortunate in that I work with a lot of streamers, Netflix, Apple TV Plus, and you know, the need for promoting the shows has remained really high. So I've worked on projects for Snap and other places that are streaming content and haven't stopped. So obviously there's a bit of a hiccup that's either already upon us or ahead of us in terms of the content that was not able to be produced during the quarantine. But I've been pretty crazy busy in this room that you're looking at since, you know, the beginning of March. And I have a 6-year-old, so it's who's outside the door whistling. She wants you to hear her whistle. So anyway, so I've stayed very busy. You know, I think that a lot of people would feel that, like, I think what Steven's doing sounds awesome. It's just, I haven't, you know, I'm the breadwinner for my family and I've kept going, and it's been really great, to be honest. Like, I've forged new paths, and despite having had most of my career in theatrical publicity, meaning movies being released in theaters, you know, having established these roots in streaming, things have kept going for me.
We will come back to that, because the fact that the lot of industry trends got wildly accelerated during this period, and it has changed the structure of the industry. I do want to go quickly to Julie, Janet, and Glenn about their COVID era time spending. Go ahead, Julie.
Well, for any of you who are considering producing, I would say, we always say we're the first ones on and the last ones off. So right now we're doing a lot of the work that is about being the first one on. So we probably have 10 to 12 projects that are in pretty active development. So we are on Zooms or phone calls constantly with our writers, or they're sending us pages and asking for help where they're stuck. So we're trying to just get everything ready, so when we can shoot, we'll shoot. And then we have an animated feature, which is actually just happening because we moved everybody's computers home with them. It's hand-drawn animation, but they're hand-drawing onto computers. So that's the one movie we have that's in pretty active, not pretty, it's in very active production right now. It's our first animated film. And then, because we're producers, a bunch of us got together and produced an online fundraiser for AmeriCare. It's called COVID is No Joke. So if anybody's looking for an hour to just laugh, you can Google that. I think it's still probably on the AmeriCare's YouTube channel with a bunch of great comedians. So that's what I've been doing. But also, because we're not going anywhere, I think I've been using the time, particularly in the evenings after I'm cooking, because it's Little House on the Prairie over here with making bread and baking, to kind of
like Stephen.
Yeah, to kind of refill the tank a little bit, like watching really good stuff, reading really good books, kind of refilling the artistic tank, which reminds me what kind of stories I want to tell.
I think
Instant vertically big, but we'll stay out of that for purposes of this conversation.
no, but that's a super important point, though. I think that you should be super intentional about how you're, paying attention to the media and paying attention to what other people are doing and experimenting and trying new stuff, because the consumers are doing that too. Janet, how are you spending quarantine?
Well, I'm maybe a little different from others, except for Liz, in that HBO is a massive ongoing concern. HBO Max launched a week ago as a new streaming service. We have continued, it's sort of been chapters. Every week of the quarantine has been a different chapter for me. The first week was, how do you take 35 productions and shut them down across 30 hours? And how are you going to pay people who thought they were about to be working for 8 months, and you have to get them on a plane and get them home, and some of the borders are now closed. And that was the first chapter. And then figuring out sort of a sustainable thing in the first part of the quarantine. How do we keep Bill Maher on the air? How do we keep Last Week Tonight on the air from their homes, for example? And that's ongoing. How do we get the shows that were finished shooting but are still in post-production? How do we get those on the air? Jonah Nolan, I joke about it all the time, finished Westworld from his dining room table while teaching the times tables to his kids. It's a crazy time. We have very, very big shows that'll be on the air this summer that are being posted from literally from people's homes. So that's going on now. And then a huge part of my day is figuring out how we're going to come back, how a physical production, the making of something, which is a huge number of people in a small space at the same time, how are we going to do that in a way that's safe? And if we want to do that in a way that's safe, how do we negotiate with our colleagues at unions and guilds so that everyone feels safe and wants to return to work? So that's taking a huge amount of my day. I would like to say I'm refilling the tank in some way. Certainly with my family I am. Dinner has become kind of a sacred thing. I have two 19-year-olds of my own and two others in my house. And so it is a very rich time with them, but I'm watching nothing that isn't related to what I have to get done in a certain 24-hour period, which is awful.
So great. I'm sure you're maybe through your 19-year-olds, you're understanding TikTok better.
Definitely.
I have created 10 TikTok videos with my 22-year-old, and I cannot understand the TikTok interface at all. So I post them on Instagram, and she's like, "You're hopeless." But they're all on Instagram. Glenn, how are you spending the quarantine?
UCLA is on the quarter system, and I'm still teaching. I have a class tomorrow night, and then we have an additional session the following week. And, I think most of you students on here are probably about to graduate, but if you're not, I really took it as an opportunity to rethink what I was doing. It's a seminar class, but I pulled in, we're very guest speaker driven. I pulled in composer, music supervisor, animation person, people who live in New York, because I can, because of Zoom. So we always have very good industry people. That's the strength of the programs based in LA. But it's been great to pull in like people who normally wouldn't come to a class at 7 o'clock in LA. And I think everyone teaching class is looking at like, how can I make the best of it? And I think with having summer, there'll be even more time. I just happen to have a little extra time. Usually my spring quarter is my least busy. I only teach one class, and that's when I focus on development. But it's been a lot of time trying to spend with students, a lot of administrative. It's like I've sort of said the virus multiplies emails as well as much as anything, because it was a tsunami for the first month.
Right.
A lot of the students are doing internships. Some of them have been postponed. Some of them haven't. Some of them are working at companies where they're included in staff meetings. The one thing they all seem to be doing is coverage, because people are focusing on development. So that's a skill. If you're interested in the creative part of producing or being an executive at a studio or network, it's a skill that's done remotely. They rely on students to do this. It's one of the first things you do. So that is something that would be really valuable for you guys to improve. I mean, it took me a while when I first moved to LA. That's something. It took me forever to synopsize something quickly. I could do the notes like super fast, because that's the fun part for me as an English major, but like synopsizing was a while. So as you're thinking of how you spend your time, but part of that is developing your point of view and your sensibility and your ability to talk the language of film and why things work. And there's certain books, but some of it's you just got to do it. And you got to read a lot of scripts. And you got to be able to know what's good, what's bad, and what works. And the last thing I'm doing is I'm really an outside person. We're lucky. My husband and I have some acreage out in Malibu, and when he's a doctor and we go out on the weekend, we're outside. But even when I'm in town, I wear the mask and I get outside. I live near the hills, and being outside is just, I find so I need it, and so it's great that we feel lucky we're able to do that.
That's great. Thank you. And yes, the encouragement about having outside time is really good. It feeds every part of you, including your brain part. So we will shift into now. The rest of this is largely going to be about career advice. And so part of that is I do want to encourage anybody who wants to use the Q&A function to use it. And I'm going to ask a few questions while you're thinking about any questions you want to have in the Q&A queue. I do want to just underline something that Glenn said that is important, whether you want to go into marketing or PR or producing or production. Knowing what your take is on something, knowing how to express, like having an opinion about something, knowing how to express it, knowing how to talk about something and synopsize something in a really like directed way is super important. Like that is probably the biggest thing, whether you want to sell something to somebody, whether an idea, a critique, a marketing proposal, being able to really cut to like the essence of what it is and make it clear what you're advocating, what you're trying to sell is super important. And I know sometimes students don't always think about that part of it because there's no class that teaches that really. Maybe there are some. We have 2 professors on the call. Maybe they do teach that, but it's really, I had to learn that the hard way. And it really will help you your entire career. But what we'll do is while I'm waiting for any Q&A showing up, I do have the pre-submitted questions, but I do want to do the next couple of questions I want to do as a lightning round. I will ask you it, and I'm just going to call on each of you, and you can pass, or you could give me a quick answer. But that first question, does location matter? Do these people have to move to LA if they want to work in this industry, or do they have to move it to New York? Any answer is fine for me. Janet?
I think I've got a qualifier to it. If you want to work in creative, in the development of stories for film and television, you absolutely need to get yourself to LA or New York, and actually preferably LA. You just have to. That's where the deals are made. That's where the people who are going to be your peer group are growing up. That's where you need to be. If you want to work in physical production, meaning you want to learn how to run a set, how a set operates, you could go to anywhere that is a production center that you can get a work permit. Go to London, go to Atlanta, go to New York, come to LA, and get yourself on a show and work. And to a certain extent, being somewhere like Atlanta, where there are fewer people coming to the movie business, is maybe a good way to go. And don't stay there necessarily, but although Scott's had a lovely life there, but stay there long enough to develop some real production bona fides, and then come to LA or New York. But I think absolutely you have to go where the concentration of the industry is. And
you think that's still true post pandemic? And
I'm going to qualify again then. This is maybe going to be an unpopular thing to say in this forum, but I'm going to say it anyway. You guys who are recent graduates, you have drawn the short straw. This is a terrible time to go and look for a job in an industry that is defined at its DNA as an apprentice culture, because it is nearly impossible for anybody to take on an apprentice right now. The strong recommendation from health officials in the production arena is smaller crew, nobody there that doesn't absolutely have to be. So we're hiring fewer people. We're going to make fewer things for a very long time. My advice for right this minute might actually be fill your tank creatively, learn whatever you can learn, but maybe do something else useful for 6 months. You know, go help a nonprofit figure out how to cut videos for their website, or go, you know, get into, you know, a construction company and help them rebuild a burnt out store. Do something useful with the 6 months, because that will also fill your tank, and then come back to us when we can open back up.
Great. Julie, location.
What she said.
Okay.
This is why Julie is my friend.
Great. Location.
I think you have to be in New York or LA. I think that, you know, the pandemic is making things sort of flexible and inflexible, but I think that if you are going to find sustained work in the entertainment industry, it is going to be a total lightning in a bottle if you can make that happen outside of New York or LA.
Okay, fair enough. Stephen, location.
Yeah, I co-sign everyone above said. There's a reason why we're all in LA, and it's not a coincidence.
All right. Glenn?
I think it's, you know, for the short run, there is, people are a little bit more accessible right now. You might be able to, for the first 6 months, like have a remote internship if you can make the connection. But I have to say, I agree with everyone long-term. So much of, I think all of our career paths has been like the network or the job, going up the ranks and meeting people along the way. And this is what, you know, having the attitude, no job is too big or too small. And you know, you know, there are exceptions. You know, Megan Holly's a screenwriter. I read her script as part of the competition for the Virginia Film Festival. I ended up producing the movie Sunshine Cleaning that she wrote, and she debated it. And as someone who's a writer, she's made it work. She's had deals with J.J. Abrams and Fox, and still lives in Richmond. And when she comes, she'll come to L.A. and say, I'm here for a week of meetings. And she has a family in Richmond. So, you know, I think that kind of path, I think it's possible, maybe, but you know, if you want to be in production or in development, I agree with my colleagues.
Yeah, there's also a difference between if you want to actually work for one of the media companies. Even, you know, I in Atlanta because I wanted to work for one of the media companies because Turner was based here. Turner largely is based in LA and New York at this point. And if the news side of it is really based in New York and the entertainment side is based in LA. So it changed. This last year I was working for MotorTrend for Discovery. I had to do it out of LA. I had to rent a place out in LA because that's where that gig was. And you get to play with this a little bit, but it becomes it was a little easier. I don't know what it's going to look like for the next couple of months, but I think it will largely return to that. We've got some good questions through the Q&A. I'd like to keep a sort of a lightning round kind of feel about it because these are these kind of questions. This has come up several times, including in advance of the session. The need for the desirability of graduate education and or getting an MFA. Again, I know, I'll take it for granted that it depends on what you want to do, but definitely I'd like some insight into, do you think it's something that anybody looking for a long-term career in the field needs to seriously explore and consider at this point as they're leaving undergraduate? I'm gonna start with Stephen.
I think there are several questions you should ask. Well, no one needs to go to film school to make a living in this film industry. So consider the debt you would incur. I'm really glad I went to the SARC program because I wanted to move to LA where the action was. And I didn't know anyone in LA, and I didn't know anything in the film industry, and I didn't know what to do with a camera. I didn't know how to edit. So that taught me everything. If you already know how to make films, if you've worked on sets, I would recommend just skipping the film industry, because even though like USC provides a lot of access, and you know, there's the networking, like you can make your own network and not have to pay all that money. So I guess it depends. If you want to go to film school, I think you should go for its own sake, for the sake of learning, for the sake of like, you know, refilling that gas tank and just like working with others collaboratively and creatively without having to worry about profit or reporting to a studio or stuff like that. Just like honing your craft. If that's what you want to do, film school is absolutely for you. But don't go to film school thinking that it's going to launch your career, because that is absolutely not the case. USC's Peter Stark program is the richest film program, and USC is the oldest film school in the world. And despite that fact, out of my graduating class of 25 people, only 6 of us remain in the industry out of 25. So you can have all the resources in the world, you can have lots of access, but the industry is really hard and really punishing, and don't expect that it's a guarantee. Just go to film school if you think it'll make a good education for you, or if you have no skills or connections whatsoever. That is my recommendation.
Okay. Liz, any strong feeling about that?
I would say it's not going to help you in entertainment, PR, and marketing. I think that if you go and get an MBA with a focus on marketing, you're probably going to get the same job in the entertainment industry that you would have had without that. You might get a job in consumer goods, like at Procter & Gamble or something, with that advanced degree, that a more senior position than you would get in the entertainment industry. But I would say that there's very, very few shortcuts to working your way up from the bottom in the entertainment industry.
And to some degree, I don't think you wouldn't want to sacrifice that experience either. That is really where you do learn a ton of stuff. So is that grassroots kind of, my God, my first gig inside the industry, like taught me like so much. Julie, grad school?
What they said. I have nothing to add. I went to law school. What do I know?
It's a lot of people go to law school in the industry. Janet, grad school?
I agree with Stephen completely. I love teaching, and I had a very rich experience getting my degree at the Peter Stark program, so it was perfect for me. But my first job after that MFA was as an assistant to somebody, and that would have been my first job had I not gone to film school. So it is more it's as Stephen said, it'll either enrich you as a person or not, but it doesn't necessarily help you job-wise. The credential is responded to in a positive way by everyone. There's no, it did me no harm.
So I have this that MBA that in marketing and finance that Liz was talking about. Nobody knows that. Like, they don't care, they don't know. Like, it probably helped me get my first job. It never helped me after that. I got stuff out of it. It helped me personally, like, get the language of business and an approach to business. But literally, if you told people I have that MBA, they'd be like, Scott Safon, really? Like, probably with that look on their face too. But I use it, but it's not a credential in the traditional sense. Glenn, MFA?
I'm very much in sync with everyone. I think it depends. You know, I didn't get one, and sometimes I weigh what I went through, which was being in the mailroom and then being a PA on Edward Scissorhands, and then being an assistant to a line producer, and then becoming a development executive. You know, our students, most of them get assistant gigs with their MFA right out. Unfortunately, they're really well placed. I mean, our recent classes at Warner Brothers, HBO Max, anonymous content. I mean, they all end up, I mean, everybody's made a lot of good points. Now that I teach in the program, and, you know, all these programs are really good, I know how well trained the students are. I mean, they've had almost a full year of TV development, script development, almost a full year of feature development, a whole year of digital media production, marketing, production, contracts. So I think a lot of students coming out of these programs succeed because they have this huge skill set, but it's not for everyone. And I'm on the admissions panel, and I'm usually drawn to students who've done something else or have worked before they come, because then they have a better sense of who they are. So I think it's really valuable, and like everyone else said, not for everyone.
But you raised an important point, and it's a subtext of a lot of things here, and I will just going to reemphasize this. grad school, some graduate program of some sort might be right for you. You don't know yet. You really do need to be out there and get a sense of who you are and what the industries you're interested in, and then decide if that can add something to it. You'll have mentors, you'll have some sense of it. You'll be able to ask that question. Don't think going right out of undergraduate is like, that has to be the next step. There might be a tendency to think more education is more important to get right now because we're in uncertain times. But I don't think that. I think this was a subtext to a lot of, you'll get so much more out of graduate school if you decide to go, if you know what you're going to do with it and how you're going to wield it and use it. And then you'll be lucky enough to have professors like Janet or Glenn and students that the future Stephen, and you'll make those things, that you'll make those connections and use it that way. And so I say this also as the father of college graduates who have gone through similar thoughts on this too. We have a question that I love actually about, because it speaks to an issue about finding work partners. The person who asked the question is, how do you find a work partner? But I do always encourage people to find their collaborators and find people they want to do projects with of any sort, in any shape of any part of your life. You should do it because this is a collaborative business. So any thoughts on that? We're in this time when you're collaborating with people, via Zoom, and it's hard to just network in a traditional way. But how do you find a work partner? And should it be a priority for any of these people right now? Janet, why don't you go?
I may be the least qualified to answer this because I've been an employee. So I have, people I work for that I worship, and people that work for me that I feel delighted by, but I don't really have a work partner. So.
Got it. Okay, great. Julie, you have partners.
I do. And I would say in direct answer to the question, I don't think you need to be in a rush, but I think when you find the right person, which I think is a largely chemical decision, it's the best thing in the world. Sorry, it's not. The coughing was not a comment on Bonnie. I mean, I've had, Bonnie and I have been producing partners for 10 years, but we always tell each other that when we stop producing, like, what are we going to do then? Like, we're still going to be partners in whatever we do after we're done movie producing. But we walked through an entire movie together, or we were almost all the way through the movie before we realized, oh, right, this is the primary relationship. Like, do you want to read the next thing? And so it was a process before we joined all of our projects and became full partners. Because I really think you should actually do the opposite of rushing to find a partner. I think that you can and should find collaborators on all your projects, but those could look like different people. It could be if you're a producer, it could be a writer. If you're a writer, it could be a director, or you could be all of those things together. I think finding individual collaborators for everything is important. I'm dying to collaborate with a lot of people I'm looking at on this gallery Zoom right now. But to find your permanent work partner, I think you really want to walk through the experience of making a piece of art together and seeing how that is for you guys from a energy standpoint and from an intellectual standpoint, from an emotional standpoint, and from above all else, chemical standpoint. Like, it's like I said, it's like having a marriage. It's like I can be with Doug because I don't get sick of him, just chemically. I just always am happy to see him. And it's the same with Bonnie. When I see her name on my phone lighting up, I always want to answer it. And it's just made, when an agent yells at me, she tells me they're an asshole. And so I feel better about it. And when we have even a small victory, we can celebrate it together. It's the best. But it's that permanent partnership is, I think, not something to rush into. I think it's something that you evolve into as an artist and as a collaborator. And then when you find that person, they help you be your best self all the time. So I'm a big, big proponent of it. But I think while you're getting ready to have that permanent person, you can have great collaborators, project to project, all the way along. Sorry, that was a little too long.
No, but also, yes, but you hit a good point. Is like, a work partner might just be somebody that when you're pulling together the collaborators on a project, you know right away, oh my God, I want to work with that person again because they love this kind of stuff, or they're really good at this, or like maybe this is the person. I mean, every one of you referenced, I mean, maybe not Janet, but Janet, you probably have long-time work collaborations through people who've done projects for HBO and repeatedly.
Yeah.
And you do have that. But you've all mentioned in your film projects that there were people that, you know, maybe to some degree, even though Stephen and Justin Simeon work together in a certain way, there's another way where he's a partner to you too, and you know, on the new project. So you always have to be open to thinking. Like, I've always been a big believer in finding those people who are like what Julie said, that when their name pops up on your phone, you're like excited, or that when you see like you're going to a meeting and that person's attending too, you think, oh, this is going to be like a good meeting. Like that's a good thing. Liz, do you have any guidance on this idea about seeking out a partnership at this stage for them, because they're feeling very alone, you know?
You know, I feel like you may not find your partner, but you can certainly find people that are allies who will lift you up and support you, whether it's, you know, reading your resume for you or reading that synopsis you wrote and giving you notes on it. You know, there have always been people in my career that I could rely on in those kind of like sort of embarrassing moments sometimes. Like, can you read this? Do I sound dumb or crazy kind of thing? And, you know, I just became a partner at a PR firm with 4 other women. And one of them is a woman that I was in the trenches with at the Weinstein Company. She did corporate PR and I did film PR at the Weinstein Company. And that was a unique experience where having close allies to, you know, help you out in some of the tougher times was really valuable. And this person was an ally of mine. I never imagined that we would run a business together, but just circumstances led us here, and it's been really great. But that is certainly somebody who I could have leaned on just as a work colleague, you know, back in those days.
Great. Stephen, work partners?
I feel like I could assign everything everyone said about work partners. I'd like to elaborate a little bit on the advocacy of it all, just because we talk about like collaborators, but something that's equally important is mentorship in this industry. Someone mentioned, I think it was Janet, how this is an apprenticeship, and that's important. So the way you work your way up the industry is by getting people to advocate for you. So no matter what job you get in the industry, you want to do a good job, because that job is always the audition for the next job or the promotion. And people don't have to promote you, you know? So like, I've gotten where I am in the industry because I've done a good job or befriended people who've advocated for me. So it's important to find those mentors and to know which people will advocate for you. And there are a lot of charlatans out there who will say, who will leave you to believe that they'll help you. And then when you make the ask, they don't return your call or something like that. Just like move on from them and just find the genuine people who can advocate for you. I'll give you a very real example. So one thing that's changed my life is getting into the ABC Disney directing program. And even though that's like a studio run program with a pipeline to directing in the studio system, it's still no guarantee. Out of 10 people who got into the program, out of like 1,000 applicants this year, I'm the only one who got a new episode because I was in the programs. So I'm telling you the numbers games because I want to be honest, but the reason I got into the program is, and I've applied to that program multiple times in the past, was this time when I applied to the program, my boss at Dear White People, Yvette Lee Bowser, was friends with Ted McNeil and was able to put in those calls. And while I was co-chair of the Asian American Committee at the Directors Guild, the president of that intercommittee, Todd Holland, was also friends with him. So I had senior level people on both sides putting calls into Disney. And I'd like to think that I got in on my own merit and my own accord, but the reality is that this Hollywood system is not a meritocracy as much as we'd love to think that it is, and that relationships matter. So I would work on cultivating those work relationships and those advocates and those mentors.
You didn't go to Hollywood with those relationships.
No, I had to build those up from scratch, and it took a long time for me to build those.
A lot of people on this call are people who I'm guessing do not have any connections, don't really have any And they're concerned about that. Like you don't really get an advocate or a mentor by reaching out, cold calling somebody and say, will you be my advocate or mentor? You really start to almost fall into those relationships because you've done some kind of work with somebody, even if you're just a very entry-level person, and somebody will take an interest in, you've shown an interest in the business and the work. And then those things evolve, and they can evolve fast, but you have to be ready for those when they come, that you have something to advocate for, and you have things. Stephen had, this notion that there needed to be an Asian Dear White People. Like, he was ready. He had that project ready. So when he needs a colleague, an advocate, a more powerful person to maybe even as a sounding board, he had that, and that's important.
Yeah, working is a good way to cultivate those relationships, but also like going around to film festivals. Like, we had Glenn Williamson find his next project from the, Sunshine Cleaning from the Virginia Film Festival, and like Mark Johnson found Vince Gilligan from the Virginia Film Festival, right? And that gave birth to Breaking Bad. So one way, if you have those connections, is to go to these film festivals, enter these competitions, and start working in the industry. It doesn't have to be like the room you want to be in. If you want to be a writer or a director or a studio head, it doesn't have to be at a studio or on a show. If you work something adjacent to it, like if you temp, that's a good way to get in. If you intern, that's a good way to get in. There are all these, the room you want to ultimately be in isn't going to be your first room in the industry. So use that room to develop those relationships.
Hey, Scott, can I add one thing that I think these guys can do right now? Sorry, I jumped on Glenn. Glenn hasn't had a chance to.
Julie, I'm happy for you to jump on me. Go ahead and I'll follow up.
I would.
I follow up after you.
One thing that I think you guys who are on the call, it's so weird because I can't see anybody, but I see there's a number of people that are there, is you can make your own circles of people that is not just one partner, but a group. Like, I've had a producing group that we've been together for 20 years. And we have a listserv together. We email each other constantly with questions. And we were all kind of on the early part of our career at that point, right? So we really have come. So it's peer mentoring and peer support. And you guys can start that now. If you're a writer, make a circle of writers where you guys share your work and help each other get better. If you are directors, have a circle of directors where you share your work and help each other get better. If you are a producer, same thing. And it's really, really important. And in selecting the people, the only criteria really is that you guys can be a circle of trust, that no one's going to have schadenfreude and want you to fail, but that everybody is going to want each other to succeed. And you guys can have that. You can start that now. And grow with that and grow together. And it's incredibly rewarding. Like, I cannot tell you how many emails I get in a given week from people in our producers group. It's been a lifeline for a lot of people for a long time. So you guys can start that. That's something you can do today while you're not in rooms together.
So that is a great point. I'm going to give Glenn the opportunity to talk about the work partner issue or advocate, but then we will start to wrap up. I do have a final question I'm going to pose to everybody, which will need to be the final question. We did have one. Just before that, also, I will say that we did have one question that was geared to Stephen, something that Stephen said about performer versus production person, and how to make that decision about which way to go. But I'm going to pass that question along to you separately because it's a wonderful question. It might be more specific to the people on the call who want to be performers. But you prompted that question by something you said early on in the things about it. So I'll just share that with you later. But Glenn, on the issue about finding your work.
I mean, I haven't. I just was lucky to work with. I've worked with a lot of partnerships, and I worked for Walter Parks and Laurie McDonald for 10 years, husband and wife producing partners, and I worked with Susan Arnold and Donna Roth and Dan Jinks and Bruce Cohen, and they're all different. I mean, the key thing seemed to be like a shared sensibility, a taste in projects, and Walter and Laurie, like, she had been a studio executive, he was a writer before he was a producer, and so they had sort of complementary skill sets. Donna and Susan had been in casting, and Donna had been producing, and then Dan and Bruce are no longer together. And I think some of it, and they made some wonderful movies and it was amicable parting, but I don't think creatively that they were ever completely a concentric circle, and they're both doing well on their own. So I think as you're thinking about a partnership, be really clear what you hope to get out of this partnership and what skills are complementary.
I mean, even if you get out of a protocol partnership, just what Julie was saying, you know, like a person you could trust, a person you could share work with, a person who probably is genuinely interested in your success and what you're doing, that would be good. I do have those people in my circle too. Marketers in general don't do that, but some of them do, and a lot of them were people I met through Turner and those times. So I was lucky in that regard. The last question. This is this is scheduled for those of you who have to drop off. Will understand this is technically scheduled for a little longer, so you can be free with your answers on this before we wrap, because this is an important question. It's a final question. We did have one question that we're not going to get a chance to talk about in depth, but since we'll talk about two questions, I'm going to give one first. We're living in a time right now, around our country that it's not even just a pandemic situation. It is we are confronting some serious issues about underrepresentation and marginalized voices and communities that are not being represented fully in business, in media, in entertainment. And some of you may be from those communities, and some of you may be interested in speaking to those communities when you do have your when you do get your platform. This could, if you're a woman, you probably feel this way. If you're a person of color, you probably feel this way. I mean, this is one of the defining issues of our industry right now, and it should be that it's always been. and I worry sometimes that it just like, how many people have you seen in the news coverage of the last couple of days going, I can't believe we're still dealing with this issue, because I can't believe we're still dealing with this issue too. Do any of you want to address that big, messy topic in a way that might give some guidance to the people on the call who may be wanting to do work that speaks directly to those communities and probably sees extra boundaries to getting that work accepted and getting that work, finding the right platform and outlet for that work. When I pre-raised this issue to the panel, Stephen raised his hand right away, like he's physically doing now. So I am definitely going to let him talk to this.
There's so many. If you have a story, if you're a person of color, if you're a minority, if you're female, right now, inclusion is hot. It is white hot in Hollywood right now. And there's so many opportunities for you to tell your story. I was fortunate to work on Dear White People for the past 4 years, but I would say like maybe 8 years ago, it wasn't so hot. But like with peak television, and television has really been at the forefront of things. Before it was just indie film, but now television more so than ever. There are like studio paying jobs where you get to tell your story. So if you have that voice, if you want to tell your story, if you're from a marginalized community, get those projects off the ground, find your collaborators, and move out to LA and do it, because there are plenty of opportunities for you. I mean, I don't know what else to say. It's an advantage right now because people are looking for fresh content.
But it's one thing to note that there's a new openness and I think the streaming services are especially aware of this, because they know that is a real value proposition out there in the marketplace, that you can speak to a wide range of audiences with a lot of content, and they need to bulk up in the content for every audience that they hope to. But do any of you have any other perspectives on what that challenge might be, or if let's say if I really had a property for that community, is there one buyer that I should, or one production company, or one group that I should really be thinking about in that? I'm just curious about that. Or is it literally, like as Stephen has indicated, that it might be equally good everywhere, or there might be an openness everywhere?
I think that's a great benefit of where we are with, like Stephen was saying, there's so many places, but don't feel like you know, you start with the digital short. I mean, you think about Fleabag, she started in, you know, I mean, that she's not, I can't say, she, you know, she started in the Fringe Festival in Scotland, and look what she's become as a creator. Issa Rae, you know, there's so many platforms to just, it goes back to one of the things you said earlier on that we were talking about, like knowing your voice. So if you're a creative person, express your point of view, and exactly what Steven says. I mean, people at Netflix, everywhere, the more authentic your voice, and particularly your point of view on things, that's finding the light of day in a way it did not before.
And that making stuff, like make stuff, like you can
make stuff, yeah.
Like,
I mean, right now, this is a sort of weird example, but the comedian Sarah Cooper, who does the Trump lip sync videos, like, it's not like she's now, like, you know, making tons of money, but she's gotten a lot of press, and she could probably get a meeting anywhere she wants right now. I mean, I don't know if anyone would disagree, but I would say any distributor of content would take a meeting with her today.
Yeah, that she's a voice. I mean, she has a very distinct comic point of view. She's funny. She has managed to make like do-it-yourself kind of videos that are very entertaining, very smart. And I absolutely, that's a great point. Sarah Cooper's a perfect example. Sorry. No, go.
I would only add that I think if you're on this call and you're thinking about a part of the entertainment industry that traditionally does not have a lot of people of color or women in it, I really encourage you to go for it now, because you know, I was telling Scott, my last trip before the pandemic was to speak at Howard University in DC, which is an HBC. And there was a lot of, oh, can I only go to be in Black shows? Can I only work at BET? Can I only do these things? And I think the answer is definitely no. And in fact, there's a real hunger. A lot of us would like to hire department heads in all the departments who are people of color and women, but we have to feed the beast first, right? We have to get more people to start being in the grip and electric departments, and more people to, you know, start developing material. We need more actors to go out for roles that are not just, you know, listed to be of people of color, but could be played by anybody, right? So I think there is right now a hunger, especially in areas that have not traditionally been welcoming to women and people of color. And I think there's a lot of room for growth in those places. And then a lot of us who are looking to hire people to run things at a very upper level really are wanting people to come in at the ground level across the board. So I would encourage you guys who are on this call to really think strongly about areas where you may not have seen people that look like you. I think, I don't think that's a barrier. I think that's actually a place where you can make really significant progress right now, like really significant.
And I do think you have to give yourself a couple of years to do this. Like, don't feel like the first thing you do, the right, you know, like you got some advice through this session that, you know, a lot of us didn't have glamorous first jobs. I didn't get the job that I thought was like, oh, my dream job. I finally got into the media world until I was 31. I mean, when I got to move from advertising to work at Turner in 91, I mean, it was a long, in retrospect, it looks like a long time, but at the time I was like just learning like hell during those first 7 years after grad school. I was like, wow, I know how commercials are made. I know how marketing plans are built up. I know how to write a memo. I knew how to pitch an idea, you know, like it all got used and everything. And so, you know, there's the final question I'm going to give you all a chance to be somewhat optimistic. And I think it's something that I want to hear your answer to this, but I'm sure a lot of the students do too, because they're thinking on the positive side about our industry and about where the opportunities might be. And one of the attendees wrote the question this way, and I'm just going to read the way he or she wrote it. Do you agree with the perspective that we are in a golden age of content that could be historically equivalent to the golden era of television or Hollywood? But how will this coming era of entertainment be defined? And I asked you to answer that question, but with an eye towards if these people are getting ready for what this industry is going to look like a year from now or beyond, you can speculate a little bit too, because this is what this is for. So Janet, do you want to go first?
Wow. Well, I'll start, but then I'm hoping others will be more articulate and follow on. I do think it's a golden age because the business construct of what we do is broken open. And the streaming services particularly are starving for content, and particularly starving for good content that serves a wide demographic or that serves a section of demographic that they don't have other content for. So it is the Wild West in a good way. There are a lot of venues you can sell a good show to and who will now invest the money it takes to do it well. So there's lots of possibility. It's a time of big possibility, which is of course strangled right now by the pandemic, but it will be back. So yes, I do think it's a golden era. I think that probably shakes out a little bit over the next, I'm making it up, 5 years. I don't think there will be as many players in the content space because it's really big gamble from a lot of these companies, and at a certain point it'll shake out a little bit. But yeah, come now, not now, 6 months from now. Come
6 months from now. Use now for getting your.
Yeah.
Julie, golden age?
Yeah, it is. I mean, I was worried a couple years ago because when we were really in the heart of trying to get a lot of things done, I felt like the middle had fallen out. Like you could get your really big tentpole made, or you could get your no budget thing made, but your star-driven project that needed money because it had some scope but wasn't a superhero movie was not getting made. But I think what has happened, which is making a golden era, is that because the talent, and by talent I mean writers, directors, actors, producers, cinematographers, everybody are now platform neutral as of the last couple years. And by platform neutral, I mean like Charlize Theron has a movie that's about to debut on Netflix, and she went into it knowing that it would debut on Netflix. Same thing with Gal Gadot and Ryan Reynolds and Steven Soderbergh, and this platform neutrality, meaning I have a story I want to tell, and I will tell it wherever whoever raises their hand and wants to give me the financing and a great platform to do it and the support to do it means, I think that creates the golden era. I think we were stuck for a while with people who were like, I'm only doing theatrical, right? Or I'm only doing television, or, but the platform neutrality is what I think, combined with what Janet just talked about, is creating a golden age. And I agree with all that she said about the shakeout. But I dare any of us to find things that we're not really excited about, that we're watching or that we're watching and enjoying right now. There's so much.
Also, I'll just add to that. The international, the global marketplace is broader and more accepting than we used to think too. You used to have to worry about, can I get a foreign distributor? And now it's like, wait, streaming services are like getting your work into other places, and we're actually taking work from other places and introducing it to U.S. audiences, and it's very successful.
Mm-hmm. And we're watching international things here. Parasite is a great example of that. And we also can see things historically because of streaming now. We can see wonderful classics from years past. So anyway, muting.
Liz, you just launched a business that's been busy. Is it a golden era from your standpoint?
I mean, it's a golden era in that there's a lot of work. I don't want to speculate on sort of the quality of all the work. I mean, I work on things that are sort of what would be perceived as traditionally highbrow and, sort of for an intellectual crowd. I also work on things that are extremely mass market and might just be considered kind of like really like lowbrow entertainment. But, like it's not my place to sort of judge the quality of it. I'm, my position in the industry is doing something different, which is making people aware of what's out there. So, I spent a good portion of my career working on those primarily mid-level movies that were more rare. But I can tell you, you know, without a marketing budget, those movies often don't find their audience, and that's an unfortunate thing. So in a world that has so much content, it costs more to get your content seen. And I think a lot of people think, oh, you know, we'll use social media and it will go viral. But it's, you know, there's often a lot of dollars behind the promotion of products that get seen by a large audience. And you know, looking back at things, you know, I wish that I could have do-overs on certain movies and had a larger marketing budget, and that they might have actually found their audience that way. You know, good movies that didn't connect at the time.
Okay, Stephen.
And just to give a tangible example, would be a movie called Dope that we bought out of the Sundance Film Festival. It was a great movie, and it was a crowd pleaser, and people liked it. And you know, like, there are no do-overs, and it now has, I would say, maybe a cult following and fans, but it's a movie that didn't find an audience, and I can't say for sure why that was. You know,
I think we definitely have projects like that. But I think, to something that Julie said, we might be getting some degree of little do-overs because of things getting resurrected and algorithms picking them up and finding them and surfacing them. I think even a show like You was canceled by Lifetime and Netflix. So, oh my God, people are actually watching this. We should give it another season. And now it's obviously, you know, turned into one of their big hits. And who would have thought? But I'm sorry, we'll all check out with the movie's called Dope.
Dope, yes.
And where is it available on one of the streaming services?
You know, I don't know where it's available today. It would have been available on Netflix a few years ago, but I'm guessing it's probably on iTunes. So.
All right.
But it was, you know, Shameik Moore, who's gone on to star in some great projects, and some other, you know, names and faces you guys will, I mean, A$AP Rocky and some other Zoe Kravitz. Anyway, I could go on. But.
Stephen, Golden Age?
Definitely in the golden age. In 2012, there were like 65 shows on television, and now there are literally hundreds. I think some of you know the number better than me. I think it's between 300 and 500 shows going on right now. Now is a great time to come out here. That said, I want to issue the big caveat, which is that it's going to be unstable for a while, and you prepare to be poor. And I want to tie this into the question that Scott raised about like being the talent versus supporting the talent. There's a spectrum of stability in the film industry. At the most stable ends, you have like accounting, agencies, well, not even agencies that much anymore, management companies, studio operations. And in the middle, you have like the set jobs that are known as like below the line jobs. So like production, cinematography, post-production. And then the sexier jobs, it's a spectrum of sexiness. The sexiest jobs that most of the people here are doing, the writing, the directing, the acting, the producing, these are the most unstable jobs. So when you think about your career trajectory, think about your tolerance for risk and how long you're willing to be poor, and how much you want to collect unemployment, how much you want to live off Medi-Cal, and rally all the resources you can. And also think about the reason you want to go into this industry. A lot of people come into this industry for the wrong reasons. They come in for the glamour, they come in for the sexiness. It is anything but that, and it takes some time to get there. The people we really need in the industry are the people who want to tell their stories and support people who have stories to tell, support the marginalized communities, support Black voices. And I also want to tie that into what's going on right now, because obviously we're in a time where we realize that systemic inequality is not behind us. It is in many ways exacerbated. And one way we can fight that is by uplifting stories about people of color, hiring people of color, and doing that through our art, and doing that through working in Hollywood. So if you're thinking about doing that, we definitely need you in this industry. Please come out here and do it, but also realize that it's not going to be easy.
Great. Okay, that's all of those, everybody's made important points on this. Glenn, you get a chance to give the final word. Are we in a golden era?
We are. In fact, as a professor, I'm giving you all homework, but you don't have to do it. all of my producing students, I have them read 2 books which help articulate how we got to where we are. And one of them is about male showrunners and the other is female. And the first book is Difficult Men. And it tracks the history of like the anti-hero with David Chase and Matthew Weiner. And the second book is Stealing the Show, about women showrunners, and pretty much leads us up to about 2 years ago. And if you have the time, they're 2 great books to read about how we are where we are in such the golden era. The optimism is, I think you guys on this call are going to be part of the solution. You know, a lot of us on this panel have worked in independent film and know, you know, how difficult it is on so many levels in some of the best possible ways for your movie to be seen are film festivals, and then the challenges of getting people to go see a specialty movie in the theater. You know, it had to be an event like Judy or Downton Abbey. And so I'm not gonna lie, I am worried about independent film and that experience of going to see something really kind of unique. But I'm optimistic that better times are ahead. You know, there will be a vaccine, and I think people are just gonna appreciate and embrace movie going when they can. How that goes about the next year or so, I'm not sure, but it's you know, if anything this pandemic's taught us is like how much we value so many things, you know, distant relatives, friends around the corner, and shared experiences, and that will be back.
Well, before we go, I will just say that my own feeling is I do think it's a bit of a golden era, because there was movies and there was TV and there were sort of mini series around, these sort of like multi-part narratives that were big and expansive. I just got finished binging Mrs. America. I'm about to start binging The Plot Against America. These are big, gorgeous, epic experiences that really weren't considered like the main product, and now they kind of are. And anyone in this room probably might have been proud to work on any of those projects. Janet probably worked on Plot Against America, but you know, it's extraordinary what the industry is creating right now. I do think it's a golden age. I don't know what the career trajectories are going to be for people in this, because it's a little more chaotic and it's not so clear anymore. But you can all have great opportunities in it. Thank you so much to the panelists. You guys are awesome. You gave a lot of your time today and even yesterday in prepping. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott, for the moderating. You did an excellent job.
Yes,
Thank you, Scott.
So much to the people at the Virginia Film Festival and at UVA, and Jody, who introduced us, and everybody. They are a top-notch group. I hope you all stay active in the Virginia Film Festival. It is an outstanding organization. It does an outstanding festival every year. We're still thinking about what this year is going to be. I went to the first Virginia Film Festival in the late 80s. Bugged the hell out of Mike Medavoy, who did not want to talk to me. But I've gone to almost every single one after that and joined the board like 20 years ago. But anyway, thanks again to all of you, and good luck to all of you students that are on call. A lot of you stayed through this whole thing, and that's fantastic. You're going to be very successful. Okay, are we good?
Everybody, thank you, fellow panelists and everyone.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank
Bye.
you.